After the mixed reaction to Temple of Doom, Spielberg wasn't immediately keen to make a third film. However, he decided to commit to another indie picture as he had promised Lucas that he would make a trilogy. And he also wanted to make a movie that would go back to the light-hearted fun of Raiders and avoid the dark tone and violence of Temple of Doom, even going as far as to say that the third film would act as an apology for the second one. Pansy flip-flopping motherfuckers.
We're turning around.
However, throughout pre-production, Spielberg became less and less interested in making the movie, as his commitment to the picture meant that he was forced to turn down other big directing jobs such as Big and Rain Man. Lucas first introduced the Holy Grail in an idea for the film's prologue, which was to be set in Scotland. He intended the Grail to have a pagan basis, with the rest of the film revolving around a separate Christian artifact in Africa. However, Spielberg didn't like the Grail idea, which he found too esoteric, even after Lucas suggested giving it healing powers similar to the Ark in the first film. Chris Columbus, who had worked with Spielberg on Gremlins and The Goonies, was then hired to write a draft. The first of these changed the main plot device to a garden of immortal peaches. The film would have opened in 1937, where Indy would have battled the murderous ghost of a baron in Scotland before shifting to Mozambique, where Indy would have been protecting a 200-year-old pygmy from the Nazis, but would have died doing so before being resurrected by the mythical Monkey King at the end. The villains would have included a cannibalistic tribe in Africa, a one-eyed Nazi with a mechanical arm, and a leader of pirates who would have died eating a magical peach because he was not pure of heart. Grown adults wrote this.
Does anyone understand a word I'm saying here?
This draft was then rewritten by Columbus to tone down some of the sillier aspects, but the new climax now involved the Monkey King forcing Indy and the villains to play a deadly game of chess. Because didn't you want one of the coolest adventure heroes of all time to play a game of chess? Harry Potter, eat your heart out!
Oh, it breaks the heart.
In the end, Spielberg rejected both of Columbus's drafts as he felt they were too unrealistic and he didn't want to risk perpetuating any racist African stereotypes, because they already done enough of that in the last film. Also, as far as realism goes, was that ever the goal here?
You're wasting your breath.
Spielberg then suggested working Indy's father into the plot. Lucas was hesitant at first as he wanted the Grail to remain the movie's focus, but Spielberg convinced him that the father-son dynamic would serve as a great metaphor for Indy's search for the Grail. He then hired Menno Meyjes, who had worked with him on The Color Purple and Empire of the Sun, to begin a new script, which was completed in October of 1986. It depicted Indy searching for his father in Montségur before travelling to Venice, taking the Orient Express to Istanbul before reuniting with Salah and his father. Together they find the Grail, and when Dr. Jones Sr. touches it, he ascends a stairway to heaven whilst the Nazis disintegrate. A later draft dated 2 months later featured the Nazi leader as a woman named Greta von Grimm, subtle, and Indy battles a demon at the Grail site which he defeats with a magical dagger. However, Spielberg and Lucas still weren't happy with the script, hiring Jeffrey Boehm of Inner Space fame to do another rewrite, and this version finally mostly resembled the final product, with Indy's father being introduced in the middle of the story rather than at the beginning. Finally, famed playwright Tom Stoppard was brought on to do an uncredited rewrite on some of the dialogue, and after an absurd amount of drafting and writing and rewriting, production could finally begin.
It's incomplete.
Some casting decisions had to take place first though, most notably the role of Henry Jones Sr. Sean Connery was always Spielberg's first choice, partly as an inside joke to say that James Bond was the father of Indiana Jones. Had Connery said no, Gregory Peck and John Pertwee were his backup choices. Still would have been cool though. Indiana Jones's dad could have been Atticus Finch or Doctor Who.
Don't you get it?
But Harrison Ford initially protested against this choice, as Connery was only 12 years older than him, and he was worried that him playing his father would be unconvincing. However, when the two finally met on set, he changed his mind after he enjoyed working with him so much. Furthermore, Ford handpicked River Phoenix to play the younger Indy after being impressed with the boy's performance as his son in the movie The Mosquito Coast. And screen icon Sir Laurence Olivier was considered to play the Grail Knight, but his poor health prevented him from accepting, and he passed away shortly before the film's release.
Oh, rats.
Filming for the movie ran from May to September of 1988, and Harrison Ford got so into the action that his stuntman had to take him to one side and ask him to stop doing so much work, as he was leaving the stunt crew with nothing to do.
That was our assessment as well.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, yeah, that lasted long, was released on May the 24th, 1989 and was another hit, grossing $474 million worldwide, and reviews were positive, praising the chemistry between Ford and Connery as well as the action, many viewing it as an improvement to Temple of Doom. However, some critics like Gene Siskel felt that the movie rehashed too many ideas already explored in Raiders, while others called it the best movie in the trilogy. I mean, just try to wrap your minds around this one, okay? So Indiana Jones is on a great quest for an ancient artifact believed believed to have been a myth in which he also has to evade Nazi soldiers and it leads to them getting the upper hand. The villains' faces melt away and then everything crumbles around them before they escape at the last minute. Brilliant and new, I know!
I've heard this one as well.
And don't forget a courageous character alongside a pussy. Straight away you can tell George Lucas had some involvement with unnecessary origin stories. The movie starts with young Indy and we get a true insight to this character, like the origin of the whip, the origin of the hat, the origin of why he's afraid of snakes. Actually, we don't get that at all. In the flashback, he isn't afraid of snakes, so you'd assume we're about to find out what happened for him to become so deathly terrified of them. But then the flashback ends, we're back in present day and we have no idea what the hell happened and why he suddenly became so scared of snakes. I mean, most of the animals in the opening are actually real, but this one really doesn't look it. Although this horse being a complete arsehole is kind of funny. Phoenix does a great job and the flashback has some great action, but you can clearly tell the adults are deliberately stalling and doing anything they can so he can have a bigger lead. But here's the weird thing. He's stolen this ancient crucifix and they chase him out a tunnel, down a mountain, onto a train, over the roof, through the train, through alligators, snakes, lions, and then he sees Indy running away and I guess his legs are now broken because he says, meh, I tried, fuck it. Indy is forced to give it back to him in the very next scene, but still. Also, this fella was originally going to be the father of Marion from the first movie, but it was cut out because, I don't know, George Lucas sucks. Because you just know he clearly wrote this.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Thanks for that insight. I heard you also don't like snakes. Also, he ends up cutting himself with the whip, and this was actually inspired by a real scar that Harrison Ford has, which is quite a nice little tie into the story.
That belongs in a museum. So do you.
I mean, he does now. Harrison Ford is pretty much an artifact. Denholm Elliott plays a fella named Marcus, and fair play to him. He was suffering AIDS during filming and was severely ill during a lot of his scenes, but he managed to power through.
Eternal life, Dr. Jones. The gift of youth to whoever drinks from the Grail.
Ah, they're giving Pirates of the Caribbean something to rip off later. How nice.
I've heard this bedtime story before.
Yeah, 3 films in and Indiana Jones still doesn't believe in anything supernatural. What does it take? Every movie he sees impossible shit and then immediately doubts a myth in the very next one.
Why don't you try my father?
We already have. Your father is the man who's disappeared.
You could have opened with that, might have been nice.
How will we recognize this Dr. Schneider when we see him?
Kinda looks like this. Might tell you can do it at some point. Adam Sandler might be somewhere nearby. At one point, Indy starts using Roman numerals to solve the location of where to start, and apparently he needs to climb all the way up these stairs just to notice a damn massive X on the floor. And maybe it's just me, but he gets over the fact that his father is missing and his house was ransacked pretty damn quickly.
It's a rubbing. Dad made of the Grail tablet.
Just like your father.
Who, by the way, is missing, in case you forgot.
Why are you trying to kill us? Because you're looking for the Holy Grail. My father was looking for the Holy Grail. Did you kill him too?
But he does finally remember that he exists. This guy's determined to kill them both, but when he lands on the boat, he doesn't immediately open fire, considering we see that he has a damn gun. Oh well, the chase and fight on the back of the boat is insane. It looks weird seeing Indiana Jones wear a suit for most of the movie though, it just seems wrong somehow. He ends up threatening to murder this man if he doesn't tell him where his father is, and weirdly the guy sticks to his guns, doesn't give him any information when on the brink of death, but when he's safely on the boat, he'll happily tell him anything he wants to know. What? So Dr. Schneider turns out to be this woman, Elsa, played by Alison Doody. Weirdly, her character is supposed to be 29 years old, despite the actress only being 21, while Harrison Ford was 46. But it leads to quite possibly the cringiest love scene I have ever witnessed.
How dare you kiss me?
Leave me alone. I don't like fast women.
And I hate arrogant men.
The movie also seems to turn Indiana Jones, one of the greatest adventure heroes of all time, into a complete dumbass.
You have the diary in your pocket.
You don't. Do you think my son would be that stupid that he would bring my diary all the way back here?
What do you think you're doing there? Get down!
Dad, we're well out of range.
How Elsa risks her entire life for the Holy Grail and ends up dying for it, and I am not joking. In just seconds, Indy attempts the exact same thing!
How did you know she was a Nazi?
She talks in her sleep.
Okay, funny line, but as far as the explanation goes, it's just lazy writing. Calm down, J.K. Rowling. The funny thing is, this was actually improvised by Sean Connery, and everyone on the set just burst out laughing. Ford and Connery do have a lot of great chemistry. They have a funny moment where they accidentally set off a wall that rotates them around to a room full of Nazi soldiers who are completely oblivious. But I swear, anything that Connery says is vital to the plot.
Well, they don't come any closer than that. I find But if I just sit down and think... The solution presents itself.
Don't get me wrong, it actually is quite funny sometimes, but as far as writing goes for the explanations, it is quite lazy. I mean, at least when Shorty did it in the last one, it was an accident. He literally says he's going to sit down and something will happen, and then he sits down and something happens. It's like something out of a sitcom, not Indiana Jones. Though some parts are genuinely funny.
No ticket.
I'm conflicted because Connery does have some genuinely funny moments as shown, but other times he's just in the way and painfully annoying. He's so unfunny at other times and needs to fuck off.
11 o'clock! Dad, 11 o'clock! What happens at 11 o'clock? Dad! You call this archaeology? Get out of there, Dad!
Elsa ends up double-crossing Indy and is then hurt when he doesn't care about her anymore. But hey, this one actually listened to me and put Hitler in the movie, and him signing autographs is pretty funny. Is this Anne Frank's? The effects are mostly great, but sometimes the blue screens are wicked obvious. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad movie, it's fine, I enjoyed it for the most part, I just don't think it holds up to the other two. The action looks cool, but it's things we've seen before, so it's beginning to get stale now. So thank God they ended with 3 and didn't do any more. But this is insane as he's being dragged by the tank to his death. And Harrison Ford actually performed this stunt as well. The crew were dumping dirt and clay on him from above. And Indy only survives because the driver just so happens to get shot. Oh well, at least it followed suit from part 2 by only using the whip sparingly. It is pretty funny as everyone thinks he went off the cliff and then Indy shows up and joins them in looking. I just kind of lose interest in this one by the end. It's very long-winded and in my mind not as memorable. Oh no, Sean Connery gets shot. Anyway, doesn't matter, he gets brought back. Son of a bitch! Weirdly, the original idea was to have Elsa shoot his dad instead, and then she drinks from the wrong grail. But I think the idea they went with instead works out better.
Impossible. Nobody can jump this.
Except for one man.
And his name is John Cena!
There is a cool moment as Indy does a leap of faith and Groot's dick comes out to help him across.
What is happening to me?
Ah, he's turning into Harrison Ford in the next movie.
Elsa never really believed in the Grail.
Oh, did you also figure that out while she slept? Oh, and want to know the origins of the name of one of the greatest adventure heroes of all time?
What does it always mean? This Junior.
That's his name. Henry Jones Jr.
Like Indiana.
We named the dog Indiana.
This movie's alright. It's not as amazing as the first two, but if you were a fan of those, you'd probably get a kick out of it. It is fun, I just personally began to lose interest. It retreads material and I wasn't as invested in this particular story this time around. That being said, it's still a fun adventure with funny moments, great action and awesome characters. And it ends with Indy riding off into the sunset, which Steven Spielberg said was to signify that the story was completely over and done with. And then George Lucas came along and said, no, I finished the prequels and now I'm bored, so I need something else to do.